Oh, it's hot. It is a vest day. So welcome to this vest day video. It is 37 degrees with about 45 with humidity. So no matter how much my AC is pumping, it's hot today. Anyway, for this video, what we're going to be talking about, a common problem that a lot of people have, and that is starting off with a scene and you create all the geometry and you think, well, what lighting should I choose? Well, I have created a scene and I'm going to show you 3 different examples: a daytime, a nighttime, and a slight beauty shot. And all of these are going to be very different, but they're going to be very simple to create. So in this video, I'm just going to show you how I put all of these together, and that should give you some pretty good tips on what you can put forward to your own scenes. I'm sure that you will learn something from this, and hopefully you can give a like and subscribe afterwards, because that helps the channel a lot. And if you wanted to get your hands on this exact scene, it is available over at iMesh as part of the 2,500 asset library, which is growing every single month. So if you sign up to iMesh for only $17, full access, you can get this scene, a bunch of other scenes, and basically anything else that you need to basically push your ArcViz career to the next level. And we also have a bunch of freebies available as well. So if you just want to get some freebies, check out iMesh. There's an iMesh Asset Manager, which is online, and you can download anything from there. So let's get into the video. Okay, so before I get started, what I want to talk about is actually going to be view layers, as that's what I'm going to be using quite a lot in this whole project. So I have a night shot, day shot, and beauty shot, and each one will contain different lights, such as different area lights, different point lights, which are going to be specific to that lighting situation. So I want to be able to quickly flick between them without having to go to all of these layers, enable them and disable them. So there's something called view layers inside of Blender. And up here, you can see that I've already created a bunch. So I have day, night, and beauty. Now, if I click on night shot, we can see that it automatically changes all of the collections. So it now has these enabled and has disabled these. If I go to beauty shot, we can see that it then disables the other ones and enables these ones. If, for example, I turn one on now, that is now enabled for beauty. If I go back to day shot and then back to beauty shot, we can see that that one is still enabled. So we can basically do anything here with view layers. Just click copy settings, for example, and that will copy all of the previous project settings for that one. I can then disable things, and then that will be set up specifically for that view layer. Now I can go back to beauty and they will all come back again. So this will enable me to actually set up different lights for different situations. And I have also already set up a compositor situation here, which I basically went over in my last bedroom masterclass. So I'm not going to cover it in this tutorial. So if you want to know how this is set up exactly, you can download this scene from iMesh or watch the masterclass video on YouTube. So let's start with the daytime shot. So usually when I'm working on a scene, I'll try to work with the first light. That will be the most obvious light, like the most important light. So now let's work on the daytime scene. And first of all, I will choose the most important light in the scene. And that's probably going to be the light from the actual outside area. So let's create that. So I'm going to go over to the world tab. I'm going to click new. Under, you can actually see a quick preview just popped up then of what I want. If I click on color, I can then click on environment texture. And then I'm going to load in the HDRI, which I want. Okay, so these are some HDRIs. So there is one which I would like to work with, and that is going to be this one. It's going to be mostly an overcast sky because I love the softbox effect of that. Makes the room feel very natural and very cozy, and it doesn't bring the attention to the sunlight, for example. It focuses the attention on the furniture itself. So let's load that one in. Okay, now I want to rotate it. So I'm just going to click on this one and do Control T with Node Wrangler enabled, which is an add-on. You just type in Node Wrangler. And then what I'm going to do is just rotate this around until I find something which might look quite nice. So I think I'm going to go for the part where you could kind of see that there was some sunlight coming into the scene, but I don't want any of that. So I'm just going to keep going back to about here. So now it's a very flat lighting, but it's very dark. So over to the background strength, I'm just going to increase this to about 8. And we can see the room coming alive. And this for me works really nicely. It's kind of a Scandinavian kind of vibe. So I want this lighting to be quite white and quite soft. And that also is nicely reflected on this sofa itself. Now, I have to also mention in this scene, I have something called a black backdrop. Now, this is literally just a black plane. So it's casting a lot of contrast into the scene. So if I remove this, we can see a lot more light comes from that area. So you might prefer this look, but if you want a bit of contrast, you can add a black backdrop. And I love doing this. I think that it creates a much more dynamic room. However, you can actually see it in these reflections. So I'm going to go to the Object Properties tab. I'm going to scroll down and make it invisible to glossy. But we can actually still see that there is a black line here. So I'm just going to disable shadow because this is actually casting a shadow onto the back wall, and that is what we're seeing. So I'm going to disable that. So now it will just look like a white wall is there. So that has created some nice contrast in the scene. And what I'm going to do now is just add one more light. So it does feel quite nice, but it feels like there is still something missing. And I'm going to add a simulation of an interior light being turned on as well. Because quite often in a room, even though it's daytime, it's quite common to have a light on inside. And I think that it might fill in this area a little bit. If we imagine this is the key light, now we can add a bit of a fill light to illuminate this side. So I'm going to do Shift A. I'm going to go to light, click area light. And I'm just going to bring it something like this. And then I'm going to set this to be strength 10. And then I'm going to click use nodes and click on black body and then set that to be 3800. So now that has kind of illuminated this side a little bit more. So in the shadowed areas, they get a bit of an orange tint, which is quite nice. And then also we have here is an interior floor lamp, which definitely won't be very strong, especially as it's a floor lamp directly in the window. So if I just click on this one, maybe give it a strength of 10, just so that we can see some light coming from that. It makes a bit of a nice glow. It illuminates this area a little bit more, and that's quite nice. And then finally, what we have in here is we also have some underlighting. So if I go to the daytime shot, I have already created them. Some area lights here, which are casting light straight down, and you can see the indirect lighting there. So this has brought out that area as well. And I do love to add underlighting to shelving, because even without that, it feels like, to me, it feels a lot more flat, and it can be a lot more dynamic simply by adding these shelving lights back. And there we go. So not only that, we can also notice that by adding this side light, or we can call the fill light, we've also illuminated a bit of this tree, which by itself, if I move this off, is quite a dark tree. So by bringing that in, we've illuminated this area. We've filled in the shadows a little bit with a nice bit of warmth from the area light. And we've also illuminated a bit of glow coming out from this lamp just for a bit more dynamic feel. Now this is exactly what I was going for, because I wanted this scene to work for a lot of different types of chairs. So the main scene itself is quite pale and quite white. So if I was to add any chair here, it should fit quite nicely. Now if you wanted to, you can add a sunlight. So I can bring this over to here and bring that into the scene. Maybe choose about a strength of 10, and we can maybe set the angle to be a bit more, so make it a bit softer, which does still look quite nice, but we want it to be a bit warmer. So I'm going to click use nodes, black body, and we could just play with this until something looks about natural. Okay, and that has now completely changed the whole look and feel of this whole scene. It may also look quite nice if this lighting was just coming in just across the floor, but for me that is now distracting from the main purpose of this scene, which is going to be to highlight the chair itself. So I'm going to remove that. Yeah. And I might include a little bit more contrast by going to the gamma and just sliding this across like this, and that will add a bit of contrast to the scene. I can then increase the exposure a little bit. And like I said, these nodes are available in the actual scene itself. And now that for me would probably be a finished interior. So let's move on to the nighttime shot. Okay, now let's work on the nighttime shot. So nighttime shots generally have quite a lot of magenta or blues coming from the sky. You're not going to get something which has a white light. There's usually some sort of color coming from the sky. So I'm going to try to find a HDRI which has that kind of lighting. And the HDRI which I have chosen is going to be this one here. So it's called Kiara 1, and these should all be available over at polyhaven.com for all of their part of their HDRI collection. And this one we can see here it's like an evening shot, or in this case it's dawn, but we can see that it has some purples and blues in it. So that's the one that I'm going to choose. Okay, and for this one I've actually set up the iMesh Asset Manager to create all these nodes for me, so it's a little bit easier to adjust. If you have the iMesh Asset Manager, you go to the local tab and you load in your HDRIs. Every time that you append or choose a HDRI, you can actually then get some parameters where you can actually rotate the HDRI, increase the strength, or a bunch of other parameters. So that's why this node setup looks a little bit different here. Immediately, what we can see from that HDRI is the scene is darker, and we can see some purple magentas coming from the outside area, which is really, really nice. But I do want it to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to try 0.5. Now, also very similar to the daytime shot, I have an area light. I've set it to a disk. I don't think it really matters at that point because the spread is 180 degrees, so it'll be very even anyway. But previously it was angled like this towards the chair, which you can do. But I thought I quite liked it basically coming straight down from the ceiling to simulate maybe a ceiling pendant light. And I quite like the effect that's going for, and that has a strength of 40. So if I turn that off, we can see it's very, very dark. We can only get the light from HDRI, and I'll put that back to 40. And that is going to be the main light source. So as I mentioned before, if you're working on any scene, you should think about what is your main light source, and then all the other lights should be complementary to that. So this is my main light source and is lighting most of the scene, and the HDRI is more complementary. But there's one more thing that I quite like to do in a nighttime shot, and that is actually add in another area light. So I've added this area light here, and it's basically going to be sitting on the window, and it's going to be pushing a little bit more light into the scene, which allows me to adjust the color even further. So I can choose some more purples. I can maybe amplify the effect that might be coming in from the HDRI, and it gives us a bit more freedom to play with here. So you can mess around here, and it just has a strength of 10. It's almost like a bit of a fill light to kind of emphasize the HDRI. So off and on. It's just kind of a nice effect. Now for nighttime shots, like I really don't like to go full nighttime because I feel like there's so much nice, good lighting coming from outside at just about evening time that most customers are very happy with that as being a nighttime shot, because a nighttime shot is just pitch black outside and you're kind of left with only artificial lights inside, which is kind of boring. So anyway, that is that at this point. And then finally, what I've got set up is some candles. So for each candle, right now there is only going to be a bit of a flame. It is just a flame, but to emphasize that flame, what I've also done is I've added some bulbs onto every single candle flame. So if I enable that, we can see I've added a bulb here, and those have a brightness of 50 milliwatts, and we can see that that has now created some nice glow coming from these candles. Maybe it's a bit too much here, but to create that glow in the compositor, I have got two glare nodes. So the first one is creating the nice star effect, and the other one is basically creating a bloom around that. So both together works together really nicely. So that has created quite a nice feeling. This does feel like an evening shot. I may even need to go a little bit darker on the HDRI, and that for me is a really lovely evening shot. What I really like about nighttime shots is you get to play with lots of really small lights to really bring out and make the scene have so much more character, which is a little bit harder in a daytime shot. So that for me looks great for a night shot. So let's move on to the beauty shot. Right, now let's work on the beauty shot. So this is going to be my most favorite one. It's the most artistic, and you can really play with some really interesting lights. So first of all, I've left the candle lights as they were. So that has already a really nice glow. You could also increase the brightness a little bit if you wanted to. So I'm going to click on this bulb and maybe set this to be 0.34. Because what I really like is the lines on the wall that are created by that. So that's already looking quite beautiful. This lamp here, I've turned down a little bit because I don't want that to be too much of a focus, and the same for these lights here. So what should I do next? Well, as I mentioned before, I don't like the HDRI to be 100% black, but for this beauty shot, which is going to be a little bit more abstract, that is going to be completely off. So I'm just going to turn off the HDRI completely. So now we are left with almost a blank canvas. All the complementary lights are ready to go. So what I'm going to do is work on a basic 3-point lighting setup in which photographers often use. Okay, so the first light I am going to bring in, which is part of the 3-point lighting setup, is going to be the key light. So that is simply a light that looks like this, and it has quite a cold temperature of 6,500 Kelvin. And also this spread is very small. So if I bring this down, it brings the spread more and more in, so it becomes a bit more like a flashlight that's focused on the chair itself. If I bring it to the default of 180, we can see it's so spread that we can't even see the light anymore. So I can bring it down to 80 and then 40. So this is the key light, and this is what I really like in this scene. But what we are left with is a very dark shadows here. So we're going to use a fill light to fill in those shadows. So I've created one here, and that's basically this one, and that has a lower strength of only 2. It has a bigger spread, so it's less focused, and it also has a warmer temperature. So that's filling in this shadow, but it's giving it a warmer color, which works quite nicely. It matches these lights quite nicely, and it complements the colder nature of this key light. And then finally, what I've got is the backlight. Now that's just going to be adding a slight rim light onto this chair. So if I turn off these ones here, we can see it's adding this glow here. I could actually make this a bit brighter. So I could set this maybe 5 or maybe 2. And we can also see that also has a bit more of a blue temperature. That's trying to be the complete opposite to these candles. So it's almost like a teal and orange effect that you get in lots of movies. So let's bring back the fill light and then the key light. And we can see the effect that we're going for here. So this looks to me very, very lovely. Now, one thing I don't like in this particular case is the tree is so black, we can't really see it, it's just a silhouette. So I do want to add a light onto that as well. So I do have an additional tree light. So this is a tree light here, and this light is only affecting the tree. So if I set this to be 100, we can see it's only lighting the tree. And that's because I've gone to object properties and then down to shading. And then I can then select the olive tree collection. So it's only visible to that collection. That allows the tree to be illuminated a little bit more, and we can adjust this how we want to. I think 20 is a little bit too strong, maybe 10, and maybe a warmer temperature. That's quite nice, so it matches the rest, and that works pretty good. We could probably do the same thing for maybe some items onto the shelving. Okay, so I have created those lights. I thought that was quite a nice idea actually, because it was a bit of a black void going on there. So what I've done is I've added 2 lights. So there's just a very simple area light, but instead of illuminating the wall as well, I've limited this to only this collection. So if I go down to relations, light linking, I've limited it just to this collection, and the same for this one, just to this collection. If I disable that, it does actually add some light to this wall, which you can do if you wanted to, but I wanted to focus on the actual decoration items themselves. So there isn't too much light going on there, but you can see the suggestion of there actually being a light. But this is by far my favorite scene. I think this came out really, really nice. And I think if you add any chair into this scene or any furniture item, I think it could pop really nicely. All right then. Those are the 3 that I wanted to try, and I quite like the result, especially the beauty shot, the daytime shot, and the nighttime shot. I guess they're all good. If you liked any of these, please do give a like and subscribe. And actually, I really like this format of trying one scene in multiple different ways just by changing lighting. So if there's another type of scene that you'd like me to try out, then I'd be more than happy to. I really just enjoyed doing this. And like I said, if you want to get your hands on this, if you want to learn from this, become better, then check out iMesh, because this will be available on there too. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys very soon.